Hello and welcome to Will the After Party. I am your host this week, Fly. I am a deaf queer Jane Austen fan, and our typical you may notice is absent. Very sad day. So please go send Liz all your love and support. But joining me to hold down the fort on the producing end, I have the lovely Marissa.
Hi! It's all new for me. I mean, I've clicked the buttons before, but Liz has always been there to correct me when I do something wrong. So it's true chaos hours this week.
And of course, we're rounded out by my wife, Alexis.
You don't call me that often enough for me to be used to it. I shocked her a little bit. Hi. I know nothing about any of the technology and will be unhelpful if something goes drastically wrong.
But your hair looks incredible.
Thank you.
I'd love to see it. Like we said at the top, this is chaos hours. We're going with the flow. We'll see how it ends up. But thank you all for being here with us. We're very excited to kick this off. Let's chat about how our week's been. Because oh boy, has it been a week. I feel like out of all of us, Marissa has had the most fun week. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's been like, but it's been fun in the grand scheme of things. I saw Multiverse of Madness last night, which was very exciting. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And today I saw Six on tour, the first national tour here in Chicago. But other than that, it's been uneventful, but not, bad events, not good events. So I think I've had maybe the calmest week of everybody.
Mm-hmm. A solid neutral. We love to see it.
Yeah.
Alexis, you've been having a bit of chaos week. What besides the chaos? What's been going on with you?
This has been a bad work week for me, or a busy work week for me. I've had a lot of work. This is our grind week, so we do days to nights, pretty much back to back. There was a nitrogen leak. I had to go to the hospital. It was a fun time. But now I'm here. I'm happy to be here. Today was a better day. And yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Sly?
Oh boy, I have had like nothing big, but nothing good.
Yeah.
One of those weeks where it's just been kind of meh. But the one light and joy of this week was we got an announcement for the Percy Jackson TV show casting, which is very exciting. They all look incredible. I am so excited. I was not like a big Percy Jackson person growing up. I read all 5 of the first series, right? The year the 5th one came out, I read all of them and I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was a good time. It wasn't like my thing as much as like Harry Potter or Artemis Fowl. Like those were the ones I really dived into. But one of my favorite podcasters earlier last year started a podcast of him reading Percy Jackson for the first time. And because of that, I got back into it. I read all the main series, I read all the sequel series, and I've just been having such a great time. And so I'm so excited. The casting choices are so incredible. They look great. I can't wait to see what they do. And so that was kind of the shining moment of my week. But before we get into what the heck was this episode of Moon Knight, let's take a moment and get all of our rantiness out of our system. Marissa, can you describe the segment for anybody who might be new here?
Okay. Before I do that, I want to say hi to everybody on TikTok who's watching. You can go to the link in, I think, any of our bios, regardless of whose account you're watching on, and join us on YouTube and Twitch so you can see all the lovely graphics, which are very relevant to this next segment. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. This segment, the rants segment, is where we take 2 minutes to rant about something in pop culture, but we have to do it in 30-second increments. So each of us will have 30 seconds each to start our rants, and then it's encouraged to interrupt the next person when it's our time again.
We're not great at it, but it is encouraged.
It is
Yeah.
encouraged. Before we jump into this, hello, Liz. I'm glad you got some rest. It's great to see you. We're so happy to have you here with us.
Yes.
Before we jump into the chaos that is rants, what are we all ranting about this week? I've been planning my rant for 2 weeks. I've been scripting it in my head over and over and over again. We'll see how much of that sticks. But my rant for this week, I planned it for last week, but we all know the chaos of last week, is why Taylor Wong is the best writer on 911. And I'm just talking OG. We're not getting to Lone Star at all here. But I'm going to go through the writers of 911 and prove to you why Taylor Wong is the best. Marissa?
My rant is not scripted at all. I decided it, I think, today. I'm going to talk about my personal experience going to the movies and going to the theater, and just some things that I've been noticing lately that have been bothering me. And, you know, how I like to go to the movies, how I like to go to the theater.
We love to see it.
Yeah.
And
we'll call it
Alexis?
my rules of engagement for
Your
going
rules
to the theater.
Engagement. I love that for you. That is so incredibly on brand. I can't wait to see where you go with that.
Thank you.
I also love that like Sly has scripted theirs, because full disclosure, my plan earlier today was to rant about Vulcan mating rituals and the people that misunderstand them. But then I decided that Spock's sexuality and Pon farr were actually like, it's like a really nuanced, big topic, and it requires a lot of Star Trek understanding. And I didn't feel like I could combine like the nuance that would take and the anger that I feel towards a certain population right now in 2 minutes. So instead, I am ranting about not entirely irrational fears that I have developed from the 911s.
Okay. I love it.
So, national disasters that are now in your brain as possibilities. We love to see it.
Squids that might fall on me while I'm in the bathroom, you know. Whole
Oh no, this lineup means I have to go first.
You can bump me to first if you want.
How do I there we go.
I don't know how to do it, but
I
know
do, but it's not doing it. Hold on.
As long as I'm not first. I swear to God, if you switch this and I'm first.
Okay,
there we go. All right. This is so stressful. I don't know how Liz does the timer every week.
Do we want to put Missa in the middle?
Okay.
So it's
only if it's easy for you to do.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Whew, I'm nervous.
Wait. We're doing 6 minutes, not 8 minutes, right?
6 minutes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. We all ready? I'm not.
I'm never ready. You're the most ready. You prepared.
That's why I'm scared. Can we all take a collective breath? Just to, like ground ourselves.
Yeah.
Just like
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Taylor Wong is the best writer on 911. There are a lot of 911 writers. You might say, how can you determine that? I'll tell you. There's some great ones. You got like Matthew Hodgin, who wrote the Valentine's Day episode in season 1. He wrote Buck Actually, he wrote 217, like all great episodes, right? And then you have like the big names, the like Lindsay Bolu and Andrew Myers, who have worked together on things like Suspicion, Fifth.
I am a very anxious person, and I like to have things planned out well in advance. Okay, I would like to, if I'm going to see a movie, I would like to be at the theater 30 minutes before it's supposed to begin. I realize that's unreasonable. I realize there's 15 minutes of trailers. I don't care. I want to be in my seat before the trailers start. I want to have my popcorn. I want to have my pretzel bites, which AMC did not have last night. And I want to sit in my seat and watch all of the trailers all the way through. That is part of the movie going experience.
My first not so irrational fear is that Sly is going to smash my heart into smithereens in the middle of a grocery store surrounded by all of our friends and colleagues. Like the way I have internalized the fear of that moment, I don't know how many times since watching that episode, I have messaged people and been like, I know I'm exhausting. So you can't call me exhausting first. I know I'm exhausting. And I'm still going to tell you about everything I learned about crabs watching.
Alexis just broke my heart. Okay, we're moving on. So Lindsay Bolu and Andrew Myers, they write on like they help with the big set piece, but Lindsay was on Rage and Boston, and Andrew did Ocean's 911 and the Christmas episode from season 3. They're all great. The only person you could argue is better than Taylor Long, if somebody said that, I would accept it, is Juan Carlos Cotto. He has done incredible. He was on Dosed. He did Buck Begins. He did Mayday. And he's the person they go to for all the first.
So the same applies for going to the theater. If I'm going to see a play, if I'm going to see a musical, if I'm going to see a piece of theater, the same applies. I want to be there when the doors open at the half hour. I want to be in my seat. I want to have already purchased my merch. I want to have my concessions. I want to have my little bottle of water. I want to have opened my concessions. Oh my God, please open your concessions before the program starts. And I want to be there, and I want to like have some time to decompress before the experience begins.
My second not so irrational fear is that my friends and JJ will make me break up with my partner once they get me a very thoughtful, very meaningful engraved emergency beacon as a Christmas gift, because apparently I am the only one that thought that was sweet and charming. And to that end, I would also accept the Vulcan tracking necklace. Like, I'm not picky when it turns comes to like.
Okay, so Juan Carlos Cotto, amazing writer, done like I was trying to say before, does all the first, like he did 3-2, 4-1, 5-1. Great, we love to see it, but he's there a lot, right? Taylor Wong has written 3 episodes. She wrote Jinx, she wrote Defend in Place, and she wrote Dumb Luck. And they are such a masterclass in the range of writing.
So all of that being said, given that I'm a very anxious person, I like to be in control of a lot of things. I have not enjoyed my experiences in the past 24 hours. I was late to Multiverse of Madness, late. We walked in during the trailers, and we walked in halfway through the Lightyear trailer, actually, which very much upset me because I'm very excited for that movie. And we were late to 6. We got there 15 minutes early instead of a half hour early. And we were there when we made it to our seats, but I did not enjoy that experience. I wanted more time.
And now my not so irrational fears are going to turn to like major accidents, right? Like I am now afraid to go to the hospital because it may explode and burst into flames, and I may be stuck inside reading all the room numbers backwards, unable to get help while a bunch of hot men lower babies down the giant ladder truck from the baby nursery, right? A huge fear. I don't want that to happen. I am now also afraid that like I'll be on the freeway in Tennessee.
Okay, so when we look at what she's written, Jinx is one of the episodes with the most calls in the whole thing. It's busy. There's so many calls. It's funny. There's a lot going on, right? And then we have Defend in Place, which is one call the entire thing. It's high stakes, high drama, tension, beautifully crafted. And then there's 514, which references and calls back to every key important moment in 911 that we connect to as fans, and it's done so well. And
so all of that knowledge established, so many people were so late for both Multiverse of Madness and 6 today. 2 people walked into Multiverse of Madness last night an hour into the movie. Why would you go on opening day if you're going to be an hour late to the movie? And they just came in with their popcorn and they sat down, and it was fully the middle of the movie. Why would you choose to continue doing that?
I'm afraid that a giant squid will escape from the sushi restaurant next door and fall on top of me while I'm in the bathroom. It will be really terrible. I'm afraid that while not even pregnant, I'll go into labor in the middle of my yoga class with a bunch of other women because it's a full moon and like we'll just have lots of babies. And like, what am I going to do with that? Because I wasn't even pregnant in the first place. I'm afraid of sinkholes, even though I live in an area that like has no sinkholes. I'm afraid of tsunamis. I'm afraid of getting stuck on a roller coaster upside down.
And that's time.
And that is time. I'm going to give us like a couple seconds to wrap up our thoughts. I just want to add, like, the 3 episodes we've seen from Taylor Wong shows that she knows what the show is about and why we love it. And that's why she's my favorite and arguably one of the best writers. Marissa, closing thoughts?
Why would you go on opening day if you're going to be like an hour late? Like, if you had already seen the movie, that's fine. But why? It was so distracting. They sat right next to me and they came an hour late. I just like why? I just don't. I mean, I understand that there are a lot of extenuating circumstances and people are late to a lot of things, but like, they showed the movie like 25 times yesterday. Why wouldn't you have just waited for the one like an hour later?
They're running every 15 minutes.
Literally. I guess they wanted to see it in Dolby. It was great in Dolby, by the way. Highly recommend.
Alexis, any closing thoughts on 911 fears?
Just no one dumped me in a grocery store. But I do want to say that I am apparently so far gone that I just saw Liz's comment about Taylor getting her master's back. And instead of assuming she was talking about Taylor Swift, my brain went, Taylor's got a master's in journalism? That would have been something that I would have
love it.
8 episodes ago, a season ago. I mean, I'm sure she does. I just, new headcanon unlocked.
I encouraged this. Alexis asked me, is 2 rants about 911 too much? And I was like, no, it'll be fun. I'll be confused. And I was right. I'm very confused.
I did feel bad for having a very specific and granular 911, like, you got to be deep to follow rant, but I've been so passionate about this for weeks that I just had to get it out of my system.
514 is a good episode.
It's a great episode.
This is what the segment is for. It's for the things we have to get out.
Well, thank you for indulging me on my very nitpicky 911 rant. But are we ready to hop in? Thank you, JJ. I was really worried that you wouldn't approve because, like, I know there's great episodes, but the fact that she's written like 2 of my favorites just puts it over the edge.
I wouldn't be concerned. JJ approves of absolutely 0 of my opinions and doesn't mind being patronizing when he's talking to me about it on the internet. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know who that's directed at.
It's sassy towards JJ. I love to see it. Are we ready to dive in to the madness that was Moon Knight episode 6?
You know, Arthur Harrow said embrace the chaos, and they really embraced the chaos.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. Of course, we're gonna kick off this discussion with our WTF moment of the week. It was tough to pick one because it felt like the entire episode was a WTF moment. But what have we specifically picked to yell about this week. I can kick it off if we want because I'm really passionate about the goddamn postcards. And
Oh,
I'm so upset. They set up the postcards so well. Like we see that in like the first episode. They're from the gift shop. They're from like his mom in theory. And I was like, they're gonna come back. I know it. I feel it in my soul. We're gonna get a return to the postcards. The whole backstory with his mother episode came and went. No mentions of the postcard. And I didn't have much hope for the finale, but why would you set that up so beautifully to be a tie back reference to not utilize it? WTF.
yeah. I mean, along that same vein, this is Liz on the show account. Donna never came back. Why did Donna never return? The best
Yeah.
character we got never returned.
Donna was great. We could have seen so much for her if only they knew how to write female characters.
What if Donna was the one sending the postcards? Donna worked
be a
at the
twist.
museum.
Alexis, what was your WTF moment this week?
Okay, so somehow I've become like the Power Ranger authority on this show. I don't really know how that happened, but apparently it happened. And I said in a previous episode that the little totem statue things really reminded me of putties from like the old, like the Mighty Morphin, like time Force, like that style of Power Rangers, old Power Rangers. And the putties were like little clay men, and you would put them in the oven and they would, grow up to big putties, right? They become like Shrinky Dinks, but the opposite. And sometimes the putties were like hard little clay things, right? And you could break the putties before they became giant putties. So all I could think about in this episode, when we have the really dramatic scene where Layla is like running to see if she can find the correct god totem, was that there are all of these like Egyptian gods in these little tiny statues sitting behind their little candles. And like, what if someone like bumps the wall? Does that mean they just all get released? It doesn't seem like, all they did was like throw them on the ground and smash them. It just doesn't seem like a very secure imprisonment situation for these gods that are supposed to be really bad. I'm like, did the rest of them get released during the battle? Because the battle would have like caused ground shakies. Like, where are they? I think it was stop laughing at me. I think it was a little risky to just put the
I'm not laughing at you. I agree with you completely.
No, my husband is laughing at me.
I'm laughing at you. I love you so much, but yeah, that is a point for sure.
It is a point.
Marissa?
Okay, like Sly said earlier, it was hard to come up with a single WTF moment of the week. But I think my answer is how is this the finale? What? Like, if you go through my notes from the episode, it is, how is this the finale? I'm so confused. I'm bored. And then in between all of those is just me screaming about Layla. It's like, what? How is this the finale? Oh my God, Layla. I'm so bored. Layla looks amazing. This makes no sense. But Layla!
Slice is, what is happening? Tie. Why is this the finale? I really love Mr. Knight's tie. What is happening?
I only mentioned the tie twice in my notes, in my defense.
Alexis really took that and ran with it.
I enjoyed the finale. It did not feel like a finale. I enjoyed it as an episode, but it was not a strong finale for me. But yeah, it was a good time. But we've been yelling about this show for 6 weeks now. And one of our main conversations this entire time has been how the structure and the format of the show has been doing a disservice to the story they want to tell and the story they tried to tell. And I think that was really reflected in this episode, that they're, sticking to that formula of trying to make a really long movie. We see it. Episode 1 and 2 is act 1, so it's like the first half of an act and the second half of an act. Episodes 3 and 4 are act 2, and episodes 5 and 6 are act 3. And because they're spaced out so much, it loses all the emotional journey of the arcs you go through in each act. So how are we feeling about how they tried to present this as a finale?
I mean, it was my WTF moment of the week. Like, it was really the thing I came away from the episode thinking about. I have liked episodes individually. I have enjoyed them individually. I have not enjoyed this show as a whole in the context of the full picture, I guess. Because it feels like every episode is a piece of the puzzle, but the puzzle, once it's built, is still missing pieces. Like there are spaces in between that are not really connecting for me. And I was just left with a whole bunch of questions at the end of this. It was not a satisfying conclusion to me in any way.
Alexis?
Oh, sorry. I think something I would really like to see from Marvel is more what they did with WandaVision, where they kind of adapted the way the story was told to the story they were trying to tell. And I definitely don't think this kind of movie format, which I would argue worked pretty well with like Falcon and Winter Soldier. I don't think the pacing was quite right there, but I think that style of like breaking it into acts and it being like one big movie really fit that type of show. I don't think it fit Moon Knight. And we've said before, Sly has said before that this was a show that really should have been told non-linearly. And I think this episode, like I really felt that through the show, but this episode especially, I was like, damn, it would have been really nice if we were kind of getting like, pieces of this story in different places. I think we could have wrapped up a lot of the loose ends by telling the story that way. There was a review I saw of this episode, and I'm interested to like read more in depth and really see what they were getting at. But one of the things that they said was that this show, as far as like MCU properties go, kind of broke this final battle curse that we've seen in a lot of the other Marvel projects. And I think what they meant is we didn't actually see the battle between like Mark and Harrow, right? We didn't get that. But to me, this show really did give us a final battle, and it was very video gamey. It was a little out of tone for me in the realm of the show. And so I think that just goes to the point that it was really kind of set up like the other Marvel movies, where we get like introduced to the character and then we have a problem and then there's a battle and the problem resolves. And I just don't think that really matched the story that they were trying to tell.
And I think the difference we see in Falcon and the Winter Soldier is every episode had like an emotional arc to them. And they felt like a complete package per episode. And when we got into like Hawkeye and now Moon Knight, we're not feeling that an episode is a complete package and it works on its own. There's growth, there's an arc, there's emotions that you feel across it. And that's been my big problem, especially when we're looking at like how the show has been edited. Like Alexis mentioned, this would have been so good as a nonlinear story. There's so many pieces that if we moved around when they happened, would have made such a compelling episode 6 to wrap it all together, to really hammer it home. I think you can tell these stories in 6 episodes, just not in the structure they're going for. But with the editing, there was a lot of talks in the first couple weeks about the episode's not looking great, the visual effects weren't, solid. How are we feeling about that later in these last couple episodes?
I mean, they really put their whole budget into episodes 5 and 6. Like, they really threw it all against the wall. They were like Field of Reeds, Boat in the Sand, Hippo God, Giant Crocodile, Bird Skeleton, magic changing suits. Like, they really threw it all in.
The shot of, you see the fight between Moon Knight and Harrow happening on the street, and then in the sky, that was beautifully edited. That was the moment where I went, oh, this is where they put all their budget.
Yeah.
I will say in this episode, and I think it was possibly because we did have more avatars that were animated, but in earlier episodes, I think it was like episode 2 maybe, whenever I fell in love with Khonshu, I think that was episode 2, he appeared to be much more real to me in that episode than he did in this one. I think all the avatars in this one, maybe because they were all together, like had a very, like my eye was like, these are not real, like these are animated. And I think in earlier scenes where I've seen Khonshu kind of like by himself in the desert or whatever, it has seemed very much like that may be a giant puppet. And I did not get that vibe in this episode, but I did like the moon stuff. This episode had good moon stuff.
Oh, the cape shot where it filled in like a waxing moon. Yeah. Beautiful. There's been some stunning visual imagery with the show. It's just very few and far between, it seems like. But speaking of past shows,
we're all just like, ooh. Now what?
I have a question to pose to you all.
Okay.
What if this was Layla's show instead?
What if it was this moment?
Marissa, take it away.
This moment, everybody can see it because it's in the show doc for my notes. This is the exact moment I wrote in all caps. Why isn't this Layla's show? Liz has been saying it from the beginning, but oh my god, this show has done a lot of questionable things, a lot of sort of disappointing things in a lot of ways. One thing I am very happy with is their inclusion of Layla. Am I thrilled with how she's been written? No, but her inclusion as a character in general, the discussion around her creation, who she's representing, I very much enjoyed. Are you an Egyptian superhero? I am. Lost it.
I got so emotional at that moment because it reminded me of being in a theater surrounded by all deaf people and a little boy who ran up to me and was so excited that I was wearing a hearing aid, and then getting to watch that little kid see the first deaf superhero ever was such a beautiful and special moment for me, and I knew exactly what that felt like to see that moment happen on the screen with the Egyptian girl being like, "Are you Egyptian superhero?" It was so well done and so beautiful. It just, my heart.
Yeah. It was really special. It was. I mean, does that balance out her only being a wife and daughter? I don't
Absolutely
know.
not.
That's that's one of my things, right? There was a really interesting conversation on Twitter this week from some of the men that were involved in Moon Knight, talking about like daughters and like women in their family who were very moved by seeing a superhero that looked like them, right? And there was an anecdote about, you know, girls wanting to straighten their hair and seeing Layla and realizing that they could wear their hair naturally, and like that's really exciting. And I don't want to take away from that for anybody, right? It reminded me, Matt Fraction, who wrote the Hawkeye comics. He wrote a lot of comics, but those are kind of the ones he's most famous for. He was at a con one time and he was talking about how he had started a new series, Odyssey, ODY-C, for his daughter, because his daughter was complaining that there weren't a lot of women in space stories. There weren't a lot of like Greek mythology stories about women, right? Or mythology stories about women. And so he wrote her the Odyssey set in space, but all of the characters are women of different sizes and shapes and colors with different hair. And like, it always touches me when I think about that comic, because this was a man who kind of went out into the world to make the world look like a better place for his daughter. I think that is what the attempt was from Moon Knight. And I think that's really special. But I do wish that Marvel would think about the long con with these, right? Would think about these reveals in terms of longevity. I think a lot about the Endgame scene where all of the female characters come together and all the controversy that scene has brought. And remember, I had done a TikTok video about it because I was disappointed, because it felt like to me that Marvel was asking for applause for bringing all these women together when they had a lot of other opportunities to do it in a way that was more meaningful. And a lot of the pushback I got,
where they could have an actual conversation.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
or like be well-rounded, or anything, right? And so a lot of the pushback I got was like, well, my daughter saw it and she didn't care. She was just excited that a female superhero was on screen. And I'm like, and that's great. But then what happens when she wants to dress like that superhero and there's no merch for her? Or she wants to read the stories about that superhero and there aren't any, or she wants to go back and watch that movie and it doesn't exist, right? And to me, Layla is kind of in a similar vein there, where it's really exciting and it's really cool. But like, eventually these little girls that love Layla are going to go back and be old enough to watch this show and realize that Layla was a wife and a daughter, and that it didn't need to be that way.
Yeah.
Liz is having strong feelings about this costume in the chat here.
Yeah.
And how impractical it is. Let's dive into that. It is stunning. It is beautiful. And I appreciate that. But this is the best choice.
Yeah, I don't know why it's the choice. I mean, I like it as like a, let's display the wings. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up a big picture of it.
Oh, it's so pretty.
It's so pretty. No, at least she's wearing pants. At least she's wearing pants. Other than that,
is on the floor.
I mean, other than that, I don't know what to say about it. Her hair came down actually in the transformation, which is that's a thumbs down. What else can we say about it?
I mean, I think one of the cool things that it does is that it really calls back to kind of this Egyptian heritage and Egyptian mythology in a really classic way. And I think that's really cool, right? Like I think it's really exciting to not only have an Egyptian superhero, but to have one that's very culturally recognizable in that way. But I think there are maybe some ways to like mesh that. I think when I think about like the Wakandan warriors, right? The Dora Milaje, like their uniforms are very indicative of their heritage, but they're also a little more practical than this one is.
They have the sides actually reinforced.
Yeah, and we see that they're armored, right? Like we see that when they're fighting. But I think, like when I think about like traditional martial arts costumes or uniforms, for example, someone will me for that. Let's scratch that from the record.
She's a theater kid who
I'm a
also does
theater
martial arts.
That also does martial arts. But martial arts uniforms, I think, are, we followed that heritage for a really long time, and now they are incredibly impractical. Like I can listen to capital M men wax poetic about geese all day long. They're not practical. They fall off all the time, right? They're thin. And that's kind of the same thing where it's like you're so committed to like being indicative of this like long lineage and this heritage that you kind of forget that it needs to be upgraded for practicality a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. And a lack of practicality has been a theme in the show overall.
That segue, babe.
Thank you. Do we have any final thoughts to say about like this as an episode? Oh, we did not talk about the end credits scene. I have so many thoughts about the end credits scene. Let's jump into that real quick.
Okay. Well, can I just say, is this the finale? Like I'm so confused. Is this show actually over? Is there going to be more? There was no like card.
The
Jake
Moon Knight
Lockley will return. Moon Knight will return. Mark Spector will return. None of those cards.
Uh-huh.
And yet there was no resolution, and then there was an end credit scene. Like what's happening?
Okay, but hear me out. When we see Khonshu in the limo, he's wearing a tie, and it's the same tie that Mr. Knight wears.
Also,
Yes,
best part of the episode was Khonshu in the limo. I mean, not really. The best part was Layla, but like the second best part was my man in the limo.
I want to tell Sly this for the first time on air. I pitched a version of the show promo images that had that picture. And everyone in the group chat of all of our mutuals that had seen the show already said, no, the picture's too dark.
That's so disappointing. I love that tie. When Mr. Knight first appeared in this episode, I was like, wow, the detailing of that tie, beautiful.
It's a good tie.
You find a high-res photo.
Okay.
We can do a retroactive switch.
We also love to see Drake speaking Spanish. That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
A choice.
Yeah,
I don't know why it was
fun.
made, but it was fun.
There was a lot of multilingualness in this episode.
True.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we all have some iteration of why the license plate? Why is it a gratuity plate?
Why is it? And also, why is it Spector?
Spector, because
it's fun.
Jake Lockley is not Mark Spector.
And
Mark
there's
Spector
a lot
doesn't
wrong
know
with
he
that
exists.
scene from a mental health perspective, which we will get into later. But like that whole thing is kind of like a hot mess. It was funny to me because in our notes somewhere we have like how does this connect to the greater MCU? And my immediate reaction was like, but does it? Like, because it's the same thing of like, but I don't know where this is supposed to fit. I don't know why this is supposed to go on to do.
I don't know why they made this show. Like, I truly don't understand why this was a show that they pitched, greenlit, put into production, and then distributed. Why?
I think the answer to that is Marvel is trying to go for a very different tone this phase. Because we've seen like phase 1 was the superhero movie, and phase 2 was like the suspense thriller movie, and then phase 3 was like, we're not racist, here's women. Right? And I feel like phase 4 is them saying superhero movies are not a genre, so we're giving you dark and gritty and pretending like that hasn't been done before. Batman,
but they
who's
didn't
he?
do it well. but they didn't do that well.
You all are missing the point. Okay, the point was that Marvel needed its first mentally ill superhero.
Oh yeah.
Because PTSD and panic attacks in their first MCU movie ever doesn't count.
The strongest origin story since Iron Man. And Oscar Isaac's in the MCU.
And Oscar Isaac's in the
MCU. So I think our conclusion to that point is it doesn't contribute.
Sorry, halfway through that, I realized I left out a part of my rant. It's fine. I will bring it up later. I just no. I'm going to do it at the end. I'm just saying it all out so somebody will remind me.
Okay.
What do we want to dive into next?
I mean,
let's talk Egypt. They spent so much of the press tour promoting this is Egypt, and it's really well done. We have so many consultants. How we feel about that?
So this episode was interesting to me in that we get that great moment, right? Where the little girl is like, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" And that was the moment I remembered we were in Egypt. I was like, "Oh, that's where we've been this whole time," right? Because I think because we didn't get a lot of the culture, we didn't interact with a lot of Egyptian characters, right? Outside of our main
Dune Star Wars desert.
Right, we're in this nondescript desert, and we spent half of that in an imaginary asylum. It felt like if you think about old spy shows or even covert affairs, this to me, this Egypt felt just any not American destination on that side of the world. Leverage does this Yugoslavia, China, Middle East hybrid all the time, right? Where it's just this is a nondescript, we're gonna, it's Kyiv adjacent, right? It's Sokovia. It's this random, place that embodies stereotypes about a certain geographic in the world, right? And that to me, sorry, I got distracted by Elizabeth.
I was waiting for you to
Don't worry. I also did. And that is grounds for divorce, Elizabeth.
I had a hard week, Liz. Do not make me go through this spiral again.
Sly and Elizabeth are not married. Me and Elizabeth are married. How dare
I am
you
not
flirt with my
married
wife.
to Liz. I
How
was not
dare you flirt with
intending
my
to
wife.
flirt. I'm sorry.
The worst thing when she said that, I am not married to Liz.
I deeply regret my actions as they have appeared to be in the flirting nature. I feel like I need to do a notes app screenshot apology now.
Why are we blaming Liz? We're blaming Liz because Liz is the one who interpreted it as flirting.
There will be a notes app
apology now.
as soon as we end the show.
But I'm not sure the apology is for you, Liz. I think the apology needs to be to me. I don't think we're apologizing to you.
No.
We're apologizing to moi. But it's okay because we talked it out and apologies were made before I was asked to move in and move out of my apartment and then got trapped in an apartment that was not mine with nowhere to go. So it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
See, and you said that and you were like, we talked it through. And I was like, we talked it through as a crew. Our flag means death. You all can live in 911 world and I'll just live in our flag means death world over here in my brain. Moon Knight.
But Egypt. Yeah, the one point they get is for not doing the classic foreign country yellow filter. We love to see that.
Yes.
And the detailing has all been very good. Especially in the tombs, all the details feel well placed and accurate, and you're looking at a textbook picture of these rituals. But other than that, I got the same feeling with the Judaism aspect of the story. If you take the Egyptian aspect minus the mythology out, if you move this to a completely different country, it doesn't feel like we're subtracting anything from the story here.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to have spent more time in Egypt with other characters.
I want to know what's going on with that family whose dinner whose dinner got ruined. It looked like a really good dinner. I was heartbroken. In the fight scene, there was a table set with like a family having dinner, and it just went everywhere. Broke my heart.
Or like the little girl that asked about her being a hero. Like I would have liked to see that set up a little more, like to know more about her when she asks, so it's even more like. I mean, they could have even given me the classic, like, my brothers can like superheroes and I can't because I'm like, I would have taken it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like here's your weekly, if you reference the production brief, they talked a lot about like their representation of modern day Egypt, and I feel like we didn't see any modern Egypt. Like we saw a lot about ancient Egyptian, mythology and gods and their practices and everything. But I don't feel like I learned or saw anything new about Egypt, about like the Egypt I would see if I went there today, other than like the filter, which is incredible, and I'm so happy that it's gone, and the difference is really astonishing. But like other than that, it's Egypt.
And one of the gods was British. Sorry, that's
Egyptian British. Okay.
Egyptian British hippo.
Yay, colonialism.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Egypt, I guess.
Yep.
Before
check.
I want segment cards for a show, and I want that segment card to be like, it's Egypt, I guess, question mark.
I love that. Before we dive into other aspects of the representation here, which I feel is going to bring down the tone a little bit, Alexis, will you yell about villains and cults for a little bit? Because I am so fascinated about everything you have to say here.
The cult thing really died really quickly.
I had so many thoughts about cults today. TikTok, cult o'clock. I'm ready. Okay. But I will say, I think this is also going to bring the tone down. Like, I don't think me waxing poetic about cults is going to affect. But okay, so I actually thought there were aspects of the cult storyline in this episode that were really interesting, right? And to me, it kind of came to a head when we're talking about like, well, your like Harrow's scales aren't balanced, but he's leading a group of people who have balanced scales. And we had talked in earlier episodes about how I think Ethan Hawke had mentioned in an interview or a couple interviews that he was kind of drawing inspiration from some more modern day cultist, right? Like when we think of like Keith Raniere with NXIVM, like that kind of thing, right? And I think one of the interesting things about that is that the modern cult is very much looking at like enlightenment, right? And like, self-discovery and acceptance. When we look at like, this is where I'm trying to seem like I don't know a lot about cults. If we kind of think about NXIVM sometimes, it appears that they used an outdated form of cognitive behavioral therapy to convince their followers that they were becoming emotionally enlightened, right? Like that was the whole buy-in. That's why people were there. And so it was neat to me to have this moment in the show where we showed an unbalanced, like somebody with unbalanced scales leading the balance, because I think that's such a draw in the modern day cult, right? Like even when we think about Yogi Tea and like that cult and where that came from, it was the same type of thing, right? Like we are going to be enlightened through this practice, but we are serving these really despicable men, right? In most cases who have like unbalanced scales. But stop smiling at me. What I would have wanted to see is this laid a little more heavily throughout the series, because we got some really interesting. Don't take my husband away.
I can't appreciate a beautiful rant from my wife.
You can. It's really endearing. So anyway. we got so why are you moving me around? We got
because I am now Liz and I need people to go back to the places where they were.
We got some really interesting moments early on, like episode 2 or 3, where we saw this really like these like socialist seeming values in this cult, right? And one of the things that came up, I believe actually from JJ, was like we don't want to put these like socialist ideas in the hands of this like villain story. And that happens a lot with cults, right? I think we could have started, like if we would have played the cult as more of a long game and layered it in through more of the episodes, we could have kind of created this distance between the followers who had these ideals and Harrow whose scales are unbalanced, and that would have been a way to remedy that. But I think laying it in a little more heavily would have also allowed us to compare and contrast this to all of the other cult-like groups that we have in the MCU. And when I started thinking about it, I realized that like there are like a lot of them, right? So we could have kind of compared this to like the anarchist movement that we see in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or some of the brainwashing and following we see in the Red Room. Even when we talk about like the 10 Rings and what those organizations look like, right? There are a lot of these kind of like group organizations in the MCU. And I think kind of playing into more of the cult angle as a through line in this show would have allowed for some really great commentary. Yes, Marissa, I'm sorry, I'm stopping now.
No. Are the Tracksuit Bros a cult?
Right? I mean, they're a mafia, and I feel like the mafia is on its own, you know.
Axis.
So I can give that rant another time, right? But like, it would have been neat to compare some of those groups, and I just thought it was so cool in this episode to kind of like get this line and like, you know, you will lead them, and the only kind of drawback in this episode in particular to me was that I didn't like the placement of a cult that was unaliving people in the middle of the desert in the Middle East. Like I thought that was a little. The imagery of that was a little, but I think that the cult TM would have been an interesting villain if it would have been peppered into the episode more. There, I have yelled about cults.
I greatly enjoyed that. Thank you very much. At least it was led by a white man.
Mm-hmm. Most cult leaders seems to be
white men. You see that in Runaways as well.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of that, what's that? Is it like from New Girl, that TikTok sound where he's like, oh,
a white man! No! Yeah. Ooh, look at Liz with the big terminology. The idea of groupthink in Phase 4, the themes of the era relate to mortality and afterlife is so fascinating. Look at you go, bestie.
Yeah. Bestie.
Speaking about no white men, let's talk about female characters on the show. Where'd they go?
Where are they?
Where are they?
I mean, it's this one.
What happened?
And that's it. So
the one girl he went on a date with, or tried to go on a date with.
I don't know her name.
The mean boss lady,
Donna.
Who I loved.
She's gone.
And Layla.
And where? Literally, what happened to her? She's just gone. There was no resolution to her arc.
Liz is being spicy in the comments tonight.
Where did they come from? Where did they go? Where did they come from? Kevin Feige.
Yeah, you nailed that.
Ooh, if the MCU can do anything, it's erase characters. Pew, pew, pew,
like
pew, 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 pew.
That.
I do think that the alligator god used female pronouns, but her avatar was a man, which I had an issue with.
And she's the baddie. Why are all the baddies in Phase 4 women?
But I would have liked to see, I feel like, yes, it's repetitive, but like since they clearly knew Layla was gonna like end up as a hero in this story, like why not have Harrow be a female cult leader? Like why not have that avatar be another woman. I crafted this whole story in my head where all of Moon Knight was different. And it was like Layla's mom was an archaeologist that like took her to digs when she was young. And like Mark was running around temples and messing stuff up. And that's how they met, right? And there was never any involvement other than that. He just released a bunch of stuff by accident and she had to handle it. And the villain was a woman. That is the story that I wanted.
TikTok
And
coming
that
soon.
why is it all about her dad? Like, why is the only character development we get from her? Her dad was an archaeologist and he was unalived. Like, if you flip that, and even her mom was an archaeologist and she was unalived, it would still give us a moment to have, you know, more well-rounded female characters that their only development isn't based on men.
I think what it boiled down to for me was like there are so many male pieces in her story. Like there are so many men pieces in there. And like I would have been okay if Marvel had like just at least just picked one. Like instead of like it being about her marriage to Mark and her romance with Steven and her dad. Like if we could have just like picked one and like changed the other two, like I would have accepted that.
I also realized in this conversation, this episode 6, had every opportunity to pass the Bechdel test. Still didn't, because Layla had several conversations with Toedit, only about Mark or Harrow. So, or Khonshu even. I think they had a conversation just fully about Khonshu.
About, well, it was
not
about
even
how,
reaching the bare minimum.
How she saw Khonshu treating Mark. So two men.
Two men.
Yeah. It is a choice. You know what was also a choice? Where was the Judaism? Where did it go?
Where did it come from? Where did it go? Where did it come from? Kevin Feige.
That's our new theme song. We need all the Cotton Eye Joe themed Kevin Feige merch. Somebody write it down, please.
I want to see those edits by the time I'm done with the show.
Any musicians in the audience?
Please. But yeah, like why do you spend so long in a single episode setting up all this like Jewish imagery and like he's Jewish, we're giving it to you, to just not say anything about it ever again? What's up with that?
This show to me, it is interesting in that sometimes it feels like they like picked up pieces of story from source material, but didn't really like and analyze them or think them through all the way, right? Moon Knight was first written in a time where like the Lara Croft Tomb Raider story was very popular, right? And she also has, you know, like goes on her journey because of her relationship with her dad and how, you know, he was unalived and her mom was, you know, not in the picture. And like all of that is a piece of her story, which feels very similar to Layla's. There were several times in this series where we talked about like the comparison to Batman and how obvious that was, right? And I think the Judaism piece too is something that's in the comics. And so it was almost like, well, we'll put it in the show because it's in the comics, but we're not going to like analyze it or figure out how to utilize it or like update it. And I had a hard time this week because I saw so many conversations from people involved in this show and how proud they were of the work they did and how, you know, the long journey that they had been on to produce it. And I really want to respect, you know, the effort that they put into the show. Sometimes I wonder if maybe some of those choices kind of hit the cutting room floor or if this was more of like an editing piece. Like I'm not placing blame. I just think it's interesting that some of it seems a little like, oh, well, that story card must go there, but we don't kind of analyze what the story card should do.
And Liz makes a great point. Who is the show for? Like all of these themes and pieces and ideas that they feel like they just kind of threw in there and it doesn't land for the people who you would think it would be for, and it didn't change any viewpoints on who it might not be intended to represent. And that's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whose choice it was, but it was a choice.
Yeah. I still don't know why they made this show. Other than
Oscar
like
Isaac.
Moon Knight's Oscar Isaac's in the MCU now. And like Moon Knight's a cool character, but like did they do a cool job of making Moon Knight a cool character? I don't really know.
The show
The show did give the gays
Some
Khonshu.
gays. Not this gay.
Some
gays.
Why didn't we market this after party as the gays of the after party?
Oh.
I'm sorry, I just had this realization.
What?
We're here. We're queer. We're throwing the after party.
We're throwing the after party.
So last week, we didn't get to talk about this because my husband wasn't here. But I really like Khonshu, right? We all know this. And so last week when we were watching the last episode, like halfway through, I'm like, Khonshu, my baby who wronged you. I was like, raw. Like there's a long history of like actual stuff here. But this episode, I was fascinated by his relationship with Alligator Goddess. I was like, is there like I feel like there was like a primed like Bachelor in Paradise style spinoff of all of the gods and what they have done in their afterlife. Like I was like, is there some like there felt like some very,
little
like,
bit
personal animosity.
Yes, it felt a bit like scorned exes.
Yes.
This would be the perfect place to do an episode of Alpine Asks a Question. Give us Egyptian mythology 101 in Alpine Asks a Question.
I work for part-time for an English company based out of China, and they created this. I'm trying to see if I can find him. They created this little guy. This is like Dino, right? And so Dino leads our learners through their English lessons. He's from space. This is his sister Emma. It's a whole thing, right? But he gets costumes for everywhere he goes, and I can just like imagine like little Alpine and like her Egyptian garb standing in front of like a animated pyramid, being like, "Hey, this is my buddy Khonshu, and he's sad. Let's talk about it."
We love to see it. We're almost done with this midnight conversation, but before we wrap it up, we would be remiss to not talk about the mental health aspect of the show. Now that we've seen all 6 episodes, how they handled dissociative disorders, how they handled mental health in general. How are we feeling about it now that we've seen everything they're going to give us at this time? Lots of faces of dejection.
Listen, sounds in pain.
You know what? Moon Knight has been a show.
Yeah, has been a show. So I think I will actually start this because I have like a correction / explanation to give. So I am a crazy person, and that means that I rewatch all of our after parties like a lot. And in rewatching them, I discovered that I think it was the episode we did with Bucky. I was speaking about inciting incidents in DID, right? So this moment where we see like Mark's brother die, and then we see the abuse from his mom, right? And I said that there was some controversial research on how, or there was a controversy in the research about how inciting incidents occurred in DID. And I wanted to make sure that I pointed out that I wasn't trying to say that we don't see inciting incidents in DID, because we do. But what we see more commonly with dissociative identity disorder is prolonged trauma through a certain amount of years, right? So like up to like 9 years old, right? That's kind of the age range that we're looking at and seeing this prolonged trauma. So what I meant in regards to that episode was we kind of saw this inciting incident and we knew there was trauma, but the episode to me kind of muddied like how prevalent that trauma was. And it almost portrayed it as like mom is coming to be abusive. So like, this is the moment that the DID occurs. And I don't think that's accurate, right? I think it would have been a little bit better for us to maybe get a clearer idea that this was something that had gone on for a longer time. But I went back into the research this week to kind of look at that and like tease out those differences. And one of the things I saw was this pretty new article. I think it came out last year, kind of readjusting these ages at which we see DID kind of the systems start to form. And what I saw in a lot of that research was like up to 9 and prior to 9. And I remember in that episode talking about like there were either 9 or 10 candles on this birthday cake. Was that supposed to represent his 9th birthday? And thinking back on that, I thought it would have been cool for them to kind of pay homage to that, to research in that way. And maybe that's what they were trying to do with the birthday cake. And that's why we saw that instead of a bar mitzvah, because he would have been older, which wouldn't mean at all that they couldn't layer that into the story, you know, later and show us that as well. But I wanted to make sure that I clarified that before I ranted about all of the other things that they did wrong.
Yeah, and when we're looking at like dissociative disorders, it's in like DID, it's these like fragmented pieces of your personality as a child aren't forming together and solidifying in the way they typically do by that age. And that's kind of how that's developed. And for some reason the age I've always seen was 8, but like 8 or 9, something around that. If you don't develop DID by then, you won't, right? Like it's something we see a lot of times is like it's like discovered in adulthood, but that's because it's a protective system too. But yeah, I've been trying to follow along with all the different TikTok creators who are systems who are talking about the show. And one thing that I found really interesting in their terminology is a lot of them say like, this is the best we've seen so far, or this is the best I could expect from a superhero show. And while that feels like them saying good representation, to me, when I hear that, I think the bar was on the floor and they didn't go under the bar. Right? And there's all these aspects that we're seeing that, you know, most of them have been pretty close to the experience, but it felt like all the instances of them trying to portray DID in the story was to make sense to a general public and not necessarily to be representative, which is such a hard balance when you're writing these stories. Is where is the, you know, pure accuracy and where is the making it palatable for an audience that has zero knowledge on this topic. I'm just curious how you feel they've balanced that in the story so far. With this character so far, I mean.
Marissa's looking at me like I should have thoughts.
Because I don't have thoughts. I mean, my main thought is they, in none of their promotional materials and none of their press would even say DID. Like they would say mental health. And like, what does that really mean? Like, how much time are you going to spend in your show trying to explain this disorder to an audience that is not familiar with it? And how much time, and are you doing that for the sake of like the story, or are you doing that for the sake of accurate representation of the disorder? And then if you're not going to do it for the sake of accurate representation, why would you not take the space in your promotional materials, in your press, in the talking points you're giving your actors to give accurate representation of this disorder? That really bothers me, that they just continued to use the like mental health buzzword of like, this is a story about mental health, this is a story about like finding yourself, and like, say the words.
Yeah, and if they don't want to specify like dissociative identity disorder, because there's multiple like dissociative disorders, right? You can just say dissociative disorders. And that gives the people watching the press, the people interacting with this media, enough of a like buzzword to be able to search to get more information for themselves. Like if you're just saying, you're right, like if the actors are like DID this and DID that and never explaining it, people are gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
What's going on? But if you say like dissociative disorders in general, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about representation in media, especially when we're looking at, dissociative disorders or even like mental health in general, I think that the themes in the storytelling are as important, if not more important, than the actual like physical representation. And to me, Moon Knight at best muddled those themes, and at worst had some really harmful ones. And so in this episode, to me, it was a little hard for me to like parse and unpack like what I was supposed to take away from it thematically, right? Because at the heart of it, there seemed to be this story about like, not wanting to give up, his alter in this case, right? And it really reminded me of other, protective trauma disorders that I'm more familiar with, and like the idea of like trying to give up a compulsion, right? Or working through PTSD when there are parts of that at least to me are so protective, right? I've even said like sometimes it feels like I'm trying to give up like a childhood blanket because I've had this thing with me for a really long time, right? And I think there were aspects of this episode that like almost got there, but then they would like push it almost too far to where I was like, I don't even know if we're talking about DID anymore. Like there were times where this episode in particular read more to me like Elena and Catherine going at it in the Vampire Diaries than it did like DID, right? It was like, oh, these are two different characters that look the same rather than like these are parts of a system. And I think that got more complicated when we got that line from Khonshu, like he's more troubled than he knows. I was like, ouch, right? Like I don't know that that's the language that I want to use in this already muddled story where, we're giving up alters and we're getting back alters, and there's a physicality that doesn't make a lot of sense. And now we're, dissociating at will, but we're really not. And all of a sudden now we're also troubled. Just seemed.
And I just have so many problems with them telling a story that feels like it's trying to be a commentary on like the idea of fusion within alters, but not making that clear or doing anything interesting with that. Because, there could be a really interesting commentary on the idea of alters fusing and then unfusing, and that could be a story you told. But when you're not giving any foundational like understanding to this diagnosis and not using any terminology related to it, you're not setting yourself up for success for telling these stories.
Yep. I also feel like we ended on a note, and maybe it was just me, but to me it seems like we ended on a note where we are firmly weaponizing DID, right? Where like Khonshu's goal is to use this disorder to his advantage and to the disadvantage of the system. And that really bothered me. I was like, I don't know that we've gotten enough positive representation in the show to balance out this kind of intentional, like, I'm going to say it, abuse of someone with a mental divergence.
Which makes sense for the Khonshu in the comics. It doesn't make sense for the Khonshu they've presented in the show. I just want to give you all an opportunity. Any final thoughts on Moon Knight? It was a show. We enjoyed pieces. There
Mhm.
was, some fun moments. But overall, how are we feeling?
I don't know if I would have kept watching it if we were not doing this show.
I
Because
don't know
it
if I would
doesn't
have started watching it if we weren't doing the show.
yeah. I mean, it has no obvious connections to the broader MCU, so it didn't feel like it was a necessary watch to understand coming projects. I did greatly enjoy Oscar Isaac's performances, honestly. He's very talented. There you go, Liz.
Competency.
I agree he's talented. But like beyond that, it was a show.
That needs to be another title card. It
Yeah,
was
it
dot dot
was
dot a show.
a show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or merch. I would wear that shirt.
Alexis, any final thoughts?
I think I'm interested to see how I feel when I rewatch it. There was a lot I feel like I missed, and I don't know if it's because my husband is really charming and we were watching it together most of the time, or if it's because I watched week to week. But like this episode, I was like, oh yeah, he was shot. Like I don't think that registered with me in the last episode at all. I will also say that my brain kind of flipped off in that moment where he's like in the water, and all I went to was like, because I watched it this week because I'm a problem, was like Eddie walking through the field and being like, I'm cold. That's all. Like I got stuck in that loop. So then I had to keep reminding myself that he was shot. But I do think this was a show that may be better binged. I'm wondering how it stacks up if I like watch it through, if the narrative structure works any better. And
Right.
Yay Layla, yay Khonshu for the gays. Boo representation overall. Those are my final thoughts.
Yeah.
Love to see it. And yes, Liz chiming in with her
One
final thought.
one positive.
The best music we've seen so far.
Lots of bops.
It's definitely up there. It was, some incredible music coming out of the show.
Yeah.
But thank you all for hanging out for that chaos of a Moon Knight segment. Now, there was another Marvel property that came out this week that we're going to talk about real quick.
Oh.
No spoilers.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. So
spoilers.
You can't spoil me.
No spoilers. Only half of our co-hosts have seen this movie.
Yeah, we just want to give our overall generalized thoughts, vibes, feelings on Multiverse of Madness, and we would love to hear your spoiler-free thoughts, vibes, and opinions. Please let us know how you're feeling post Multiverse of Madness. My first thought before I throw it off to Marissa is who approved the title Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? I'm so tired of this title. It's so confusing and long and jumbled. That's my first thought. I have much more, but I want to throw it to Marissa. How you feeling? Noted Wanda girly. How's it going?
Noted Wanda girly. I'm great. I'm really good. I had so much fun. I was really dreading this movie. As the days led up to it, I was getting concerned that things would happen that I wouldn't enjoy, or I would leave it feeling differently than I felt going in. That I would be scared because it's, Sam Raimi, and I was watching a lot of press where they were talking about the horror aspects and jump scares, and I don't really do well with jump scares, but it was not as scary as I thought it was. I had a great time watching it. I had a lot of fun. I have not really formed any critical thoughts of it yet. As our friend Bobby of the afternoon special says, I only have little brain thoughts right now. I don't have any big brain thoughts yet. So right now, I'm living in a happy, joyful place. It was like a theme park ride that I liked riding.
Yeah, for sure. I had so much fun with it. And I really enjoyed the first Doctor Strange. I know that's not a very common opinion in the circles we run in, but it was pretty and an enjoyable story. And if I can vibe with pretty graphics and a decent story, I'm a vibe with it. Like, do I like Doctor Strange as a character? Kind of. He's an asshole, and I love that for him. Like, I I just think there's fun things you could do with that type of character that they don't do with their other assholey characters that they do with Doctor Strange, and that's fun. I got to experience this movie with open captions, which is only like the third time in my life I've ever gotten to see a movie with open captions. So that was really exciting. So
On
cool.
preview night too, right?
Yeah, I went Thursday at 3:30
cool.
my time. Open caption screening. It was incredible. Thank God, because Regal only has the glasses, and I hate the glasses. But yeah, it was very much horror. I remember being skeptical about Moon Knight because they were trying to market Moon Knight as like a more horror, dirty, gritty type show, and I did not feel that with Moon Knight at all. I did feel it with Multiverse of Madness. I saw those horror
Oh
elements.
yes.
I wouldn't say it's a horror movie, but it embraces horror elements in a really fun and interesting way. We got to see character development. That's fun. Really interesting commentaries on what makes a hero, what makes a villain, and like the ideas, the themes of like what one's like true nature is, the things we see that are constants in every iteration of the multiverse. I thought that was really interesting and fun, and overall, I had a great time. I then jumped into a group chat with all of our lovely content creator friends, and they seemed much more down on the movie than I did. And I went, I had fun, and I'll leave it at that.
Right. Listen, I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd purely for the vibes, because I sat down in that seat, the movie started, and I looked over to Melody and I said, "This is fun. I'm having a good time." And I left the movie 2 hours later and I said, "That was fun. I had a good time." If I had fun,
Yeah.
that's a good movie. The longer I sit with it, it's been over 24 hours now. I have thoughts. The big brain thoughts are growing. The little brain thoughts are growing into big brain thoughts. I have some complaints. I have some things I would have changed. I would have chosen to do differently, perhaps. But that's a conversation for the spoiler episode of Multiverse of Madness. For the spoiler after party. As of now, I'm just having fun.
I had fun. All of my thoughts, my entire little brain thought was just, I love when women.
I love when women.
And that's all I have to say about that.
What else is there to say about that?
Multiverse of Madness was for the girls and the gays.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
As it should be.
And I have to say, as a Doctor Strange anti, as a big Doctor Strange anti, like same level as Liz, this was the project I hated him the least in. Interestingly,
We love to see it.
Probably because he wasn't in a lot of it. Even though it's his movie.
It's not his movie. His name is on the title. But it's not his movie.
Not his movie.
I Love that. We will dive into the ideas of how this phase is introducing characters and developing them based around previously established characters and how they do
Yes.
that. We've had a lot of strong feelings about that, some positive, some negative, and I'm excited to dive into all of those thoughts next week when we can talk
When
about
we
all
can
those
talk
fun
about
things.
spoilers. Hi, Lindsay.
But yes, it was
Yeah.
fun. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength, that we
Yeah.
had fun. We enjoyed it. It was a good time. If you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend it. Go watch it. It'll be a fun time.
Sam Raimi definitely Sam Raimi'd all over it. It's definitely a Sam Raimi movie, which was fun to watch. Was it a good movie?
I don't
I
care.
don't know yet. I don't really care at this point. I had fun. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. That's also where I'm at. We're on that same wavelength. And
Yes, Liz is in the comments, living in the multiverse of madness. Where is it?
Truly.
Where is it? Her apartment flooded, so now she lives in a multiverse of madness. Kevin Feige hasn't not taken the blame. You know, I feel like it might be his responsibility. He's got a lot of those baseball hats. So
Where did the water
what is
come
hiding?
from?
where did the
it
water
go?
go? Where did it come from, Kevin Feige?
He hid the water in all the baseball caps and just dumped it directly into Liz's apartment.
Yeah.
That also, like, Jeff Johns also is like known for the baseball cap. I'm like, what is it about you like men that like run comic book, land that have just decided to live in the ball cap?
Yeah. My brother has now adapted to wearing.
Adopted to wearing.
Adopted to wearing. I don't know. He's started wearing the Marvel baseball hat to all of the Marvel movies as like a nod to his buddy Kevin.
I wore my lovely spooktacular sweatshirt when I saw
yes.
Multiverse of Madness. It was a great moment.
I wore some merch, some Wanda merch from our friend Naira Burdened Shop on Etsy.
Such a good fit.
You can see pictures of it on my Instagram.
Beautiful.
Plug. But yeah, we will sit with our thoughts and come back with some more big brain things to say. But for now, it was fun.
Indeed. Maybe they do have a rat hiding under the hats, feeding them all of the ideas a la Ratatouille. You know what? I wouldn't put it past them. A rat controlling his brain makes a lot of sense for the disease. Sorry, I can't continue that sentence.
I feel like it also explains...
Phase 4 was built by Remy the rat.
Listen, I feel like it also explains the cat erasure.
Oh.
We figured it all out here.
Wow.
We're having some big brain moments on We'll Throw the After Party this week.
My big brain moment is cats chase rats. That's what you're giving me?
Yeah.
Critical thinking. Media analysis.
To see it. On the note of critical thinking, let's jump into our next segment, Under the Radar, where we talk all about the things that we think you should be thinking a little more critically or thinking about at all. And let you know a little bit more about what's going on in the world. I'm going to throw it to Marissa first because you have a very nice transition.
Oh, I do? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't know that that's true. But
do you know what your Under the Radar was this week?
I know what it is, but I don't know how it transitions.
You literally put it in parentheses, but we'll move on.
Okay.
Well, now the transition doesn't work. Like, we've lost it now.
Wait, no. Say the setup again.
We're talking about all the things we think you should be thinking critically about or thinking about at all. And I'm throwing it to Marissa because she has a lovely transition into what might be coming next.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. We are over here at Will Throw the After Party gearing up for season 2 of Only Murders in the Building. We are all big fans. We are looking forward to starting some Only Murders in the Building after parties when the show starts at the end of June. And this week we got the news that Cara Delevingne is going to be playing Selena Gomez's love interest in season 2 of Only Murders in the Building. I don't know how I feel about that yet, but it was in the news, and we'll see how it happens on the show. We will definitely be breaking down all of our thoughts right here on We'll Throw the After Party. And speaking of Selena Gomez, another big piece of Selena Gomez news this week is that she is hosting SNL for the first time next Saturday. So next Saturday will be a big week for me. Spoiler Multiverse of Madness thoughts, and then Selena Gomez on SNL. Woo woo, party at my house.
And I need to make our obligatory group chat reference. Marissa broke this news to me. I hadn't seen it. And she said, Selena is hosting SNL this week. And my brain went, I don't know how famous singer Selena, notably unalive,
I just assumed
week.
I assumed that everyone would understand that my good friend Selena is not Selena Quintanilla, who is not alive.
I was like, Marissa's hosting SNL this week with her boyfriend.
See, that's the other one.
Woohoo!
That's the other one. Sly thought it was famed Tejano singer Selena, who is not alive, and Alexis thought it was me because Alexis thinks me and Selena Gomez are the same person. Mm-hmm. So that's my under the radar. Be sure to get caught up on Only Murders in the Building season 1 before season 2 starts at the end of June.
Indeed. Alexis, what do you have for us this week?
Oh, okay. So first, since we're talking about Only Murders in the Building, I discovered today, I'm late to the party, but I discovered that Asia McClain from the Serial podcast, which is referenced quite a bit, or paid homage to quite a bit in Only Murders in the Building, wrote a book and has done several interviews about like her relationship to the podcast and like what really went on behind the scenes, including some like lies she told on the Serial podcast. It's very interesting if you followed that story or the rise of true crime podcasts in general. I would highly suggest it. I know she's been on a couple of podcasts, but True Crime Obsessed has an interview with her that you can find on Apple Podcasts. Other than that, I watched a lot of 911 this week, which is not under the radar. That's very the radar. Like we all know that I did that. I watched the most recent episode 5 times and developed opinions that are different than everybody else's. And then I decided I really needed to cry. So I watched the Well episode. I watched Eddie Begins. But in addition to that, there's this book series that I loved when I was like growing up, when I was in like middle school, high school, right? The Mediator by Meg Cabot, which people are probably familiar with, about a woman who sees unalived people. The unalived person who I fell madly in love with happens to be like tall, brunette, accused of murder and multilingual, but that's neither here nor there. And it's kind of a story of like her self-discovery and her relationship to Catholicism and her relationship to her family and to seeing deceased people and their love story, the romance story. And one of the things that I think is really cool about the series and about rereading it is that it was a series that Meg Cabot later on decided to add on to. So I started reading it in middle school, but the recent novella had Sue's in grad school, which meant that I got to follow the story with my development. But what I found so interesting was I saw several TikTok videos on my For You page about praising the Meg Cabot books for not falling into the not like other girls trope. And I found that to be that there's a long running group chat / we'll throw the after party joke about the fact that I want to be like all the other girls, and I have some, I've lived some lives, right? But I thought it was fascinating because to me, I'm not sure you can be just like other girls and be a princess, or be like all the other girls but also see deceased people. I thought that was a really interesting take, because I think she does write really human female characters that are flawed, but I think they also have something extraordinary about them that the average girl doesn't have. Suze doesn't have a lot of female friends. She's not surrounded by like a group of people that are just like her, because she has a hot Spanish ghost living in her bedroom. But anyway, that's my radar this week. So if you haven't revisited your favorite childhood books, I highly recommend it.
That's a great recommendation. Always.
There are so many books that I read in like elementary and middle school that for other reasons I have no memory of, that I know I enjoyed, and revisiting them is always a time and a half. I love that.
I wish I remembered what all of my favorite books from that time were called. I remember the books. I don't remember the titles, and that bothers me every day.
So often, where I'll be like Googling like a string of keywords, trying to figure out what the heck the book was that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Ouch. Well, I have some things I want to talk about for Under the Radar, but before I get into that, we were talking about like serial and podcasts like that with Only Murders in the Building, and I was reminded of one of my favorite audio dramas. It's called Arden, if you haven't listened to it, and it's it's an audio drama about the making of a true crime podcast, but every season the true crime story that they're making the podcasts about is inspired by different Shakespeare stories, and it's very queer and beautiful and fun and well written. So if you haven't listened to Arden, I highly recommend it. If you like mockumentaries, if you like true crime podcasts, it's the show for you, which was not what I planned to talk about this week at all. So I also have more recommendations for you. If you don't know, last month in April, we got 2 books by deaf authors that are pretty, well known in the deaf community. If you know the actor / model / advocate, etc., Niall DeMarco.
Hot person.
You were so unimpressed.
I have a lot of feelings about Niall DeMarco as a person. It's, not the time or place for those thoughts and feelings. He is a very well-known deaf person, oftentimes one of the few deaf people hearing people know about. He released his memoir. I'm very interested to check it out. He has a very different deaf experience to me. So, if you want to learn more about what like somebody who grew up culturally deaf in a generationally deaf family, his memoir is out, and I'm sure, it's great. I'm going to check it out soon. But the other book that came out is called True Biz by Sarah Novak, and it's about a deaf institute and the stories of kids going there, the different types of people who attend a deaf school and their relationships, and like how the politics of keeping those schools open and running, etc., etc., etc. And it looks really good and fun, talking about just life, love, disability, all those good things that we need in more fictional novels. So yeah, check out True Biz by Sarah Novak or Deaf Utopia by Niall DeMarco, and listen to Arden. It's very good. I I really love Arden. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Highly recommend.
I also, you were talking about, I know you've said before that like when you think about Marlee Matlin, like that's one of the people that like hearing people know Marlee Matlin as an actress, right? But I did hear that she was directing. I saw on her Instagram she's directing Accused, which I don't know much about, but I loved her pantsuit. So I'm excited. She's always looked fantastic, but like the last couple months, she's like the fits have been on point. So anyway, I'm looking forward to
that's very exciting seeing, a very prominent deaf actor getting into directing on a not predominantly deaf show. I love to see it. It proves that you can have people behind the scenes in all aspects of productions. It doesn't have to be tailored to, like, you don't only have to hire deaf people for deaf shows. You can hire deaf people for all your shows, and they will be better for it. So yeah, that's very exciting. We love to see Marlee Matlin. She's amazing. Love her. I'm very excited to see what she does in her directorial debut. This has been a show. We did it. We have successfully done an entire episode of We'll Throw the After Party. This feels like an accomplishment. We need a round of applause for that.
My favorite moment was when we were starting the show and someone said, "How do we start the show?"
You don't have to call me out like that.
I didn't say it was you. I said someone. I was thinking.
Yeah, the person hosting went, "Wait, how do we open the show again?"
It was just so true to everything I felt in my soul.
Say hi. Well, we have lost Alexis.
I do host on Pip, but I know what the opening script for Pip is because I wrote it.
Okay.
Well, we have lost Alexis on TikTok. So I think we should just say goodbye to TikTok in general.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, TikTok. You can always catch the replay on our YouTube channel at the link in any of our bios. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Yeah. Love to see it.
All right.
Before we get out of here, let the people know what you're about, what you're doing, and where they can find you. Marissa, take it away.
Alrighty. Oh, God. I just choked on my own spit. Okay, I'm ready. I'm good. My name is Marissa. I'm at Missa Bobissa on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. For the next week and the foreseeable future after that, you can find me fiercely defending Wanda Maximoff and all of her choices, regardless of how morally or ethically sound they may be. I also talk about wigs and theater and Disney and all kinds of stuff. It's fun, and I'm here every single week.
Love to see it. And of course, if you are missing our fearless leader, as we all are, our wonderful host and producer, Liz, you can find her on all the social medias at Producer Liz. If you're on Twitter, there's an extra Z. And you can find all of her wonderful big brain PR breakdowns, analysis, and thoughts on new music releases and all that fun stuff. Did I miss anything else plugging Liz?
XOXO Gossip Liz.
No, I think that was wonderful. Things might be a little bit slow for Liz given the flooded apartment. Thank you very much, Kevin Feige. But
I was going to say it, but you handled it.
But she's got lots of backlogged content you can go enjoy.
Absolutely. Alexis?
I was going to say hi. I've already said hello. This is also about 3 minutes ago. We said goodbye to TikTok, and I almost turned to express my love to my husband because I thought we weren't on air anymore. I kind of like halfway through. But I'm at Alexis Blake Reads Comics all over the internet. That's it. I post.
What do you do there?
I post about comics and cats and I tweet about 911 out of context because I'm afraid actual fans will find me on Twitter.
The 911 out of context tweets are chef's kiss incredible, can confirm.
I will say that somebody asked me for and my 911 chips on Instagram, and I found out that one of my followers is like a big 911 fan, and they also ship Lucy and any other fire department, and I really appreciated that.
I love to see it. Of course, you can find me everywhere on the internet at CycloneMC. If you want to find me yelling about 911, you can check out Thirsty Thursdays on TikTok Live every week with JJ. If you want to see me yelling about video games and other media, you can find me on Point in Progress, where I also co-host a show called MC University, where we go through the backlog of all the non-MCU Marvel movies. It's a great time. We actually just had Mario had a guest on for the Moon Knight episode, and then next week you can catch us yelling all of our spoiler-filled thoughts of Multiverse of Madness for another extra credits, and then you'll see us back on schedule for Spider-Man 3. We took a little break because of all the new Marvel stuff coming out. And as always, you can check out We'll throw the after party on all our socials at AfterPartySHO. All of our news updates, information about the show is always on Instagram first. So make sure you're keeping an eye on those stories. And it has been such a pleasure to do the show with all you lovely folks today. And with that, we are closing out the party and saying goodnight. Bye, everybody.